It is Friday, July 20th, 2018. Hardly a momentous occasion or date, but for the fact that we've been in extraordinary drought conditions, I think is the official term. We've had some austere fire restrictions and wildfire burning in the area. In fact, our home here was under an mandatory evacuation order for about 3 weeks. I haven't barbecued in quite a long time due to travel and then the intervening fire restrictions. And since it's been such a long time since I've done any barbecue, I'd be firing this thing up this weekend, whether the restrictions had been lifted or not. So we've had some rain, and so it's not a safety issue, but they've lifted the restrictions, so I don't have to worry about getting arrested by the barbecue police. But I did do kind of an impromptu review of this smoker this last winter, and I kind of wanted to do it justice, point out some of the features of this smoker, some of the things I did to it to make it burn a little more or cook a little more evenly. The experience that I had with the company, and I guess my overall opinion of the performance and quality of the smoker. So stick around, and we'll show you that. About 5:30 in the morning. Brisket's been on for about an hour and a half, not quite. Cooker's been fired up for about 2.5 hours. Okay, this is intended more of a review than a how-to, but I just gave the brisket a spritz. After a couple hours on the smoker, the smoke ring has developed about as much as it's going to. Continue to spritz it just to get a little more smoke on it, but that's about it. It's an absolutely gorgeous morning, so I couldn't resist turning the camera on. And here is the the glamour of barbecue. I'm still in my jammies. I didn't actually attend the Jedi Training Academy. This was a gift from someone who did. I had to get a job right out of high school, so I never attended college, but Starfleet Academy would have been more up my alley, because I don't have any parasites. Okay, well into the cook now. About 6.5 hours into the brisket, and I just threw on some chicken and some ribs. Here's the guerrilla version of the radio flyer, full of firewood, oak, Gamble oak. Not much to show because the meat and potatoes of this review is going to be with this thing stripped down, so get a good look inside. But what do we have going here? Some massive chicken breasts we got at Sam's Club. We've had trouble finding chicken breasts, bone-in, skin-on. And so we picked some up down there, and these things are huge. But they're good for chicken salad night. Some back ribs on top. Brisket's been on, as I say, for about 6.5 hours, and that's going to get wrapped here pretty quick. First in butcher paper and then in foil. I mentioned in other reviews that we're at a high elevation here. This particular location is about 8,500 feet above sea level, so I haven't checked the barometric pressure today to find out what the pressure altitude is, but it's high enough. So the only way I can seem to get the briskets done is to do the old Texas crutch and wrap them first in butcher paper, though, just to help preserve the bark. Temperatures are down because the door's been open. It's open even longer now. Okay, still at it. Brisket is on autopilot now. Just wrapped it in foil. It's got the old Texas crutch on it. Ribs have been on for about an hour along with the chicken. We're on track for a good neighborhood barbecue this evening. It is July 2018. For anyone who might be interested, this is a Horizon Marshal 30 RD Special, I believe is the model as they refer to it. but it's a 30-inch in diameter cooker. Cook chamber is about 5 feet long, and I thought I'd give you a tour of it. We did a cook on it yesterday. I've had this cooker, bought it about 2 years ago, I guess, and have used it extensively. It's kind of become my favorite smoker. I have 4 stick burners, Durango 24 at this location, and that's a Yoder over there, Durango 24, and a Yoder Frontiersman. I also have a Lone Star Girls vertical offset, which I recently did a review on. I also did an impromptu review on this one last winter, but I thought I'd go into a little more depth because I do like this cooker. So, and I'd buy another one, particularly a trailerable model, if the time ever came. But like all cookers, none of them are perfect. So I'll go through the good and the bad of this. This particular smoker comes with most of the options that they offer on their smaller smokers. Counterweight on the door, heat management plate inside, some extra cooking racks, I think, that sort of thing. About the only things I got on this cooker that are options or they don't normally offer are the stainless steel front shelf. That shelf is removable. That's not anything that they do extra. It comes that way to make it easier to crate, I guess, so, which is very nice because you can take that shelf off. And for me, I move this thing in and out of the pavilion over here seasonally. So we're at an elevation of 8,500 feet here and typically get a lot of snow. So if I'm going to do any cooking in the winter, it's convenient to be able to roll that into the pavilion. So the shelf coming off makes it a little easier to or conserve space in there anyway, and that brings us to the other option that I asked for. Normally just legs on the front of this. I had them put wheels on both ends. It usually comes with wheels there and a couple of legs there, but since I knew I was going to be moving it in and out, then we got wheels on both ends. Makes moving it fairly easy, especially when you empty all the shelving, tuning plates, and everything else out of it. It's still heavy, but much easier to move. Details on the crate or the grates and the tuning plates and everything come up a little later in the video. I'm actually shooting this afterwards, so that's how I know it comes next. There's the firebox. Again, a little more detail on that later. So, of the smokers I have, the construction on this one is probably the most crude. Some of the welds are pretty good. I'm not a welder, but you hear reference to the stack of dimes and that sort of thing. The welds on that right there are pretty good, and then you go right next door. Those are still pretty good. And you go next door, and those look like a clay project from a preschool or kindergarten class. I don't know. And it's not actually sealed up down here. It leaks a little bit on the outside of the cook chamber here. It runs down the side of the chamber to the drain spout and then out. I got a handle slash tool rack here, and that handle controls the heat management plate. More on that later. Factory placement of the thermometers. I replaced the thermometers that they gave us with a couple of Teltrues. Probably doesn't make much of a difference. I've got a couple of ThermoWorks ThermoQs, ThermoWorks Blue Therm Duo, which I don't think they make anymore. I don't use any of that stuff anymore. I just keep a supply of oven thermometers on hand and put those inside. They're more than accurate enough, no matter what anybody tells you about bimetal thermometers. It's good enough for barbecue, in my opinion. So, some of the features on this that the Yoders have that this doesn't, just kind of speaks to the quality. There's no flange around the door here. The cutout is kind of crude. There's a space here. It doesn't seem to affect the performance of the smoker. It seems to, it draws just fine. I can shut it down if I need to. but you can see the cutouts for the vents are a little crude as well. It doesn't matter how many times I get a wrench out and adjust these as they heat up and cool down. These get harder to move, or they loosen up so much you can't keep them in place, and it's a thermal thing. It's no matter where you tighten it or loosen it, it's a problem then the next time you cook. So it's a little frustrating in that regard, but it's not a big deal. So one thing you'll notice if you look at a lot of photos of the Horizon Smokers is they have a variety of different vent arrangements or damper arrangements rather. I don't know what the exact nomenclature is supposed to be, but I would call the chimney a vent and these dampers, I guess. But so the damper arrangement is a little different on them. Some have a single damper, some have a fancier door with kind of flames on it and everything else. And I don't know how any of those work compared to any others, but I do like the dual damper arrangement here. It seems to usually I can set these, and I don't set one side differently than the other. I just match them up, and but it seems to give real good airflow to the fire in there. So this particular smoker draws very well. The two Yoders kind of backdraft. Again, I'm not sure about the nomenclature there, but when you open the door, you get a face full of smoke. If that door is open and the smoke is just billowing out, the Firebox appears to be set just a little bit higher on the Yoders, where it's a little bit lower on this one. Again, I think it helps this one perform a little bit better. So, but it's not perfect, especially from the factory, and I'll detail what I did to get this to cook evenly across the cooking pit. So. This is the optional cooking rack right here. This usually isn't in. I only use it if I'm actually using it, and I don't. I used to use it quite a bit. I don't as often anymore. It's hard to get if you've been smoking on it, you've got some logs in here burning and everything, and if you're taking steaks or roast or anything else off that you're going to reverse sear, you've still got flames licking your food over here when you want a nice, just a hot cold bed without any logs underneath it, so it's hard to time that right. So I usually just move it over to a grill to do the sear, but you can get a nice charcoal bed going on here and use this like a charcoal grill. So it is still a nice feature, and it does get some use from time to time. This particular smoker, when I ordered it, there was some sort of difficulty in getting steel at the time. 1/4 inch is what they normally manufacture this out of, and indeed parts of it are made out of 1/4 inch steel. The ends, the door, and so forth are made out of 1/4 inch steel. But the pipe itself, it's actually rolled. You can see the seam here. So. Is 3/8 inch, which is really a nice feature. If that had been an option, I would have selected it. Not that it makes a big difference, I guess, but it certainly makes it sound a little more heavy duty. Supposedly retains heat better, etc., so on and so forth. So I don't find that the heavier smoker or the heavier metal is any harder to heat up than any of the other smokers I have, and or that it performs necessarily any better, though that this cooker does perform well. Horizon themselves, I had sent them emails and called them, left messages, got no response. I was just about to give up on them when somebody finally answered the telephone. This took place over the course of several weeks. They're not real big on, can't say customer service, because once you get a hold of the guys, they are genuine pleasure to deal with. Just super nice guys, but also super mellow and not terribly businesslike. So. And if you're looking to get a smoker in a hurry, you can probably forget it with these guys. So a lot of promised delivery dates came and went. I think they were about a month or 6 weeks out when I ordered it, and it was probably about 3 months before the smoker was actually delivered the first time. And when it was delivered, it showed up badly damaged. It was extremely poorly crated. I still have the photos that the freight company sent us. We were traveling at the time, so I never even saw it. I just refused the delivery. Called the guys at Horizon and told them what had happened. They were very pleasant about it and apologetic. I had it shipped back with no fuss, no hassle. They said they'd have it repaired in about a week or 10 days and have it back to me, and I think it was probably another 6 weeks or 2 months before it actually showed up again. But the second time it was extremely well created, and there was no damage whatsoever. So, but if you're in a hurry, these guys probably aren't the guys to deal with. So. And as I say, it's just refinements in the craftsmanship that are really the issues here. The performance of the smoker itself is great, but it just doesn't have that quality feel the other smokers that I have exhibit, and it doesn't cost that much less. It's if any less at all. It's still an expensive smoker. So, but that having been said, I would still recommend it. It does its job very well. So it's my favorite smoker. Of course, if anyone has any questions about any of this, please let me know. So I'm doing this just for information and entertainment value. So I know it's helpful to me to have these kind of resources available. Just some guy who's giving you his honest opinion of a cooker or anything else for that matter when you go to YouTube. So anyway, I hope this is helpful. I can't think of anything else right now. Okay, here's the cooker, emptied of its constituent components and cleaned up. It's just a big hollow tube. But that's one of the features I like about this smoker, is it is super easy to clean. I know there's some different schools of thought as to cleaning smokers. Some believe that the dirtier they are, the more flavor it imparts. And others believe that get a lot of tar or soot or whatever with a dirty smoker. I don't know. I don't have the luxury of exploring the option. We are out in the woods here, and we see a lot of bears. National Forest begins about 200 feet beyond us over here, and wilderness area not far beyond that. So I've seen 4 bears up here in the last 10 days. So we've got to keep our cookers clean just to avoid having that attractant here and having a potential habituation situation, bear problems, that sort of thing. So we keep them clean. And this one is easy to clean. I'll start showing you some components as we start putting this back together, but if you're considering a Horizon smoker like this, one thing you might see in other smokers that this does not have is any sort of a lip between the firebox and the cook chamber. So if you have your cooker perfectly level or tilted just a little bit towards the firebox, the grease, rather than running down to the grease drain at this end, it's going to spill back into your firebox and create a potential fire hazard there. So just be aware of that. And they note that in the instructions when you get it, to make sure that everything's drained in the right direction. The other thing that this cooker does not have is any sort of a valve here. Obviously there's no lip, so you couldn't fill the bottom with water if you wanted to, but there's no way to shut off the grease either without putting some sort of plug in there. So I imagine if you asked them to, they could probably put a threaded fitting on there, so you could put a ball valve in there if you so wanted. But they do, like with other cookers, give you a little hook to hang your bucket from to catch the grease. So the welds on this cooker are also not of the highest quality in some places. And this particular cooker, I don't know if it shows up on the camera here very well, but this weld along here is not tight. It actually leaks grease along here and then down the outside. It's not a big deal. It doesn't bother me at all, but it speaks to the quality of this particular cooker. Something else worth pointing out probably now as well as any other time is when I ordered this cooker, I don't know if they're having, I don't remember the exact problem they were having with obtaining steel. Normally this would have been made out of 1/4-inch steel. In this case they used 3/8-inch steel, which is really nice, I think. So just to make it heavier duty, but it is kind of an odd combination. The ends are 1/4-inch steel, The pipe itself, as you can see, is rolled. There's a seam down the bottom here. It's not a solid pipe, but it's 3/8 inch steel. Same with the Firebox. Heat management plate is made out of 3/16 inch steel. So, and I'll show you that here in a second. And these, by the way, are the components that came out of the smoker. The heat management plate here, sitting on top of all the grates. I have some tuning plates here. Those did not come with the smoker. I had those made. I'll show you how I have those arranged and why here in a moment. Water pan and grate for the Firebox. The charcoal grate over here, and it also came with the scraper. Okay, now this is this of course is the firewall. The Firebox is behind that. And this is the heat management plate or heat management system, whatever whatever nomenclature they choose to call it. And it is adjustable. This rod is attached to the handle down here at the end. You can slide that ostensibly to be able to allow the cooker to cook evenly or create hot spots, cool spots, whatever you want to do. When I did the initial burn-in on this, I have a couple of ThermoWorks thermal cues that I had set up with probes at various locations throughout the deal. And it didn't matter where you set this, it was terribly uneven. It was obvious that some tuning plates were going to be needed along this to get it to cook evenly if I wanted to. I'm one of these guys that would prefer to have relatively even temperature across the pit rather than have a bunch of hot spots and cool spots, that sort of thing. So the nice thing is that it was relatively easy to correct. In fact, after I had some tuning plates made up, and I did them completely randomly, I went to a metal fabricator locally, had him cut some 1/4 inch steel plate in varying widths, and then just placed them in locations that I thought would be intuitively spaced fairly closely together at first, and then wider and wider further down the line here. Got the pit cooking at an even temperature within a couple hours, so it didn't take long at all to tune it up. So and just measured those distances between the plates, and I've been setting it up the same way ever since. I never see more than a 25-degree variance from any location in the pit to the other, and it's usually much closer than that. So there are a number of factors involved. Of course, it depends on how high your fire is and how you have the pit loaded and with what kind of meats and that sort of thing. So I nearly always put a water pan over here, but I'll go ahead and set up the tuning plate so you can kind of see how I did that. If anybody's interested in the exact positioning of them, let me know. But if you do buy a pit like this, you're probably going to have to experiment to get it to cook right for yourself anyway. So also, if you can't hear me, I apologize. I'm talking a little bit low. The neighbors are outside, and I feel pretty stupid doing this. So I'm trying to at least camouflage my shame. Okay, so here are the tuning plates in place on top of the factory installed heat management plate. So as you can see, the first 2 rows of holes I've covered completely with 2.5 inch tuning plates. Next I have a 3-inch tuning plate that's covering all but the tiniest sliver of 2 rows of holes. So I don't know if it's going to be visible here. Next I have another 2.5 inch plate covering a little over half of the next 2 rows of holes, and then a 3-inch plate covering just a little over half of the next 2 rows of holes. That takes us up to the end of that particular tuning plate. I don't know if I mentioned before, but the rod that controls this is threaded, so it's easy to take in and out, and it goes in right over the rest of the tuning plate, so it works out beautifully. Typically when I'm cooking this, I have this cracked about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. That's why it's really covering the holes here at the Firebox end of the heat management plate really doesn't matter. It works out well. I can kind of control that with the handle and the rod over here. But like I say, 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch crack, and that is usually all it takes, and the thing cooks pretty evenly. Okay, so these are the remainder of the tuning plates put in place. This is a 6-inch plate, spaced 1 inch from the downwind side, I guess if you will, of the heat management plate. This is a 5-inch plate, I believe. Double check my notes here. Yep, 5 inches. Spaced 1 1/4 4-inch 1.5 and another 4-inch 1 3/4. So again, the spacing of the plates was relatively intuitive and required very little tweaking. So it's if you end up buying one of these and you want to get it cooking evenly, if it doesn't come that way from the factory, a progression like this is probably all it's going to take. So, and there's the adjusting rod reinstalled. Okay, here is the main set of racks installed. As I say, I usually put a water pan under the rack up here near the firebox, right on top of the heat management plate there, just to introduce some moisture into the cooking chamber. We're in a fairly arid climate here. It's I think it helps a little bit. However, that may be subjective. I don't know. Anyway, nice large cooking area here. If you don't need the top grates, you have really easy access to the whole deal here because of the single door. Without any kind of divider in the middle of two doors or anything like that, it'd be really easy to cook a small pig on this if you wanted to. And I'd like to try that sometime. I haven't gotten around to it yet. So, but if you're doing a moderately large size cook and don't need the top racks, you got plenty of room to move stuff around without any interference with the other racks. The only limitation on this kind of cooker is that the racks don't slide out. So it's especially when you have stuff cooking up top and you need to get back to anything back in here. It makes it kind of tough to reach, so you're just going to get some grease and soot on your arms. You just have to live now with that. One of the top racks installed. Again, if you have some smaller stuff you want to cook up top there, you have the option of using just one rack and still have good access to everything underneath it. And now all the racks installed in the cooking chamber, as you can see, it gives you a large area to cook on. So. I've said it before, I'll say it again. You know, there are going to be any number of things you're considering when you're buying a smoker, but definitely go with the largest smoker that your budget will allow. I know from experience that it's a hell of a lot easier to do a small cook on a big smoker than the reverse. So this is the firebox with the charcoal grate installed. Heavy-duty charcoal grate, probably going to be a long time before anything burns through that thing or melts it or otherwise. So, but that having been said, it's not quite as robust as the charcoal grates on all my other cookers. I mean, it's still heavy-duty, there's no doubt about it, and it weighs a ton, but the others are just slightly larger diameter rod and heavier duty expanded metal and everything else. So, but as I say, that should last a long time. Okay, and this is a cooking grate in the firebox. I believe that's standard on this one. I think it's an option on some of the smaller cookers and cookers of other brands. Comes in handy. I do quite a bit of reverse sear stuff, though I find it is not always the most convenient thing to do on a cooker like this. If you're doing some rib eyes or rib roast or lamb chops, I like to do a reverse sear on too. I'll put them in the smoker and then transfer them to another grill. The problem is when you're trying to smoke something and then immediately go to the grill, you've still got a fire burning in here and everything else, and you don't have, you don't really want the flames licking the bottom of your meat. You just want a nice charcoal bed underneath it. So. And timing that well is tough to do, so I usually end up transferring it over to a little hibachi. I don't have a Weber. I've never gotten around to getting a Weber kettle. I had one years and years and years ago, and just didn't use it because I didn't think it was very convenient. I wish I had it now. But I have my old 23-year-old Weber gasser over here.